Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. What a difference 5 days can make, eh? It's absolutely bizarre, and only Tottenham Hotspur, I think, can do it. Don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, it's not an enormous improvement, but just that 5 days, having a North London derby win, and also what eventually was a convincing away performance. It maybe wasn't for certain parts of the game, but eventually that result, 3-1 away, at a stadium that Jose Mourinho's never won at, you can't argue. It's been a pretty decent 5 days. We'll go into kind of the bit more of a nitty gritty into areas that obviously still have to be improved. But on the whole, mentality wise, you can't argue with it. That was something Jose Mourinho said after Sheffield United, wasn't it? He said that this is going to be an issue. It's the mentality thing. There's a weakness. There's a reaction to negative moments in a game. And we've now had 2 matches where goals, let's say fantastic goals really, in both games have gone in, and Tottenham have gone completely the other way and absolutely rocketed back rather than just shrinking into their shells and falling apart, which we know Tottenham can very well do. So I think this was quite an important week, and I think the most shocking thing of it all for me is that after the complete and utter carnage and chaos and mess that this season has been in, technically and mathematically, I'm not saying realistically, but mathematically, with 2 games left of the season, Tottenham could technically qualify for the Champions League. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to happen. And we are very much talking mathematically, and I'll go through the kind of permutations in a minute. But to actually somehow be in this scenario is, I think you have to give credit to Jose Mourinho. I think you do. I know he splits opinion, but I am loaded with stats today. I'm properly going to be nerdy boy. I've got them all in front of me ready to go through, whether it's about a team and various players or just various things that sprung out to me. And I just thought, I want to kind of just make people aware, because I wasn't of some of these. And I think it does. We know the football isn't pretty, it isn't great, although we've had 5 goals in 2 games, which is pretty much unheard of for Tottenham this season. Well, certainly in recent games anyway. And I just think maybe we actually aren't aware of quite the job that's been done, because Spurs were an utter mess. And, and this is myself included, recent videos have been pretty down on it, but I think for me, we'll get into it in a minute, but certainly for me in the North London derby, it was the first time I was really impressed tactically by Mourinho. I could absolutely see everything he was trying to do. And it was fascinating. I actually asked him about it after the game. I don't know if you've seen the video, but you'll have seen me him asking if I was going to pay for this tactical lesson he was delivering, because he was great, to be honest with me. He went through everything and the whole logic behind it, and you could see exactly how it played out on the pitch. And that for me was the first time. We've all seen Mourinho, the talker, the big, what do you call it, the greatest showman, as it were. But in terms of actually the tactical genius, I think you have to say, because of his history and what he's done in massive games, I think that was the first time I kind of saw that. And Arteta afterwards just admitted he always finds a way to win. And that was the first time I kind of thought, you know what, this guy, and certainly obviously it's going to be in the big games, and we know it's all about the smaller games as well, but this guy just has that little extra tactical nous that I maybe haven't seen. And I'm not just bringing Pochettino into this. I mean, I'm talking about a lot of managers out there. It was very clever. It was weird in terms of seeing a team concede possession, but I thought it was really clever in terms of Tottenham had 48 hours less to prepare for that game. Thus, he had to kind of develop this tactic, which it's almost like, if any of you boxing fans out there, the rope-a-dope, Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. It was almost like Arsenal kind of wailing in on Tottenham for round after round after round, essentially knackering themselves out, while Tottenham were just staying, protecting themselves, really going with the boxing analogy here, and then bang, in that, like, what was it, 8 minutes to go, Toby Alderweireld, it's the knockout punch kind of thing. And yeah, I was really impressed. But let's drill down into these stats, because I really want to get my nerd on. And I apologise for the t-shirt. I'm going to get the guys, people, I always get these comments like, you should have ironed your t-shirt. And yes, I should have. To be honest, it's just one I grabbed quite quickly because I suddenly wanted to get this video done. So stats-wise, yeah. So Mourinho's kind of made this point of, if Mourinho took over, if the season started when Mourinho took over, Spurs would be in a much better position. So I kind of looked into that, and he's absolutely spot on. Spurs, if the season started in November when the match, I think it was West Ham game, wasn't it? The first one away, that was when it began. Spurs would be fourth in the table. He has, from his 24 matches, taken 41 points, winning half of his game, drawing 5 and losing 7. I think only Liverpool and City have won more games than Mourinho's Tottenham. We'll call them Mourinho's Tottenham, just kind of to keep them separate. Despite the fact that we kind of know they're struggling to create chances, Spurs have scored 39 goals in Mourinho's 24 matches, which is the 4th highest total in the Premier League during that time. So there's a lot of these things kind of, I know people will say stats all, stats cover this, stats cover that. And yes, we know that the team still isn't firing attacking wise, and he's admitted that. But I thought that's quite interesting that as a base for a team that's not firing in an attacking way, that's quite good. It's something to build on. It's a really sturdy foundation. So this was another thing that I thought was quite interesting. So if the season began in November when Mourinho joined, Spurs would currently be on 4 more points than Chelsea. And obviously take into account those 2 defeats to Chelsea. So that could have been, I know it's woulda, coulda, shoulda, but it could have been a 10-point swing. They would have been, who else got 7 more than Leicester at this point, although Leicester have got a game in hand. And it's, only Liverpool, City and United, the only teams who have taken more points than Mourinho's Spurs since November. And it's like, you kind of look at it and you think from the utter shambles that it was in Pochettino's final kind of months, from the great times it was before, but in those shambles and the kind of quibbles and frustrations we've had since, when you actually look at it as a bulk, it's not too shabby at all. It really is. I mean, the key is I think he's gone in and he's fixed various issues. We'll come to some of them later. Certainly squad options. I think he's got far more now. But also just putting out various fires, and defence is a massive part of that. The defence, I had a little stat on the defence, but I can't see it. But I'm sure it was great anyway. But yeah, so I just thought that was really interesting. And we're kind of now at the point where, as I was saying about the, about the Champions League spots, it's incredible. We would have looked at this a week ago when I was probably ranting away after Sheffield United. How the hell, quite frankly, with what is just over a week left of the season, that Tottenham could actually be in that position. Bearing in mind, even a couple of weeks ago, they were 10th or 11th. And I mean, it's incredibly unlikely. It would require Leicester and Man U from their final 3 games, because they both have a game to play, to only take 1 point from those each of their 3 matches. And they play each other, I think, on the last day as well. And it would also require Wolves to only win 1 of their remaining matches. So it's so many what ifs and unlikely. I mean, what's the likelihood, especially United, you'd say, not winning any of their 3 games? It's probably not going to happen. But I think, Spurs are in a genuine chance now going for that Europa League spot. It is the second place prize. It's not what everyone wants, but, I've been told, I'd said before that certainly in the past it was something that actually you didn't make a lot of money from. Some of the people, kind of financial people in the game, have actually told me they've kind of reacted to that in the last couple of seasons, and the prize money has increased and the TV money has increased to the point where it is actually a financial boost. So I think that person I spoke to was only about 3 or 4 years ago. So it shows kind of how almost UEFA have just had to bump it up to make it a more attractive proposition. So in terms of finances, it could help Tottenham. So they're, they've got the league table here. So Tottenham just a point now behind Wolves, 4 behind Leicester and United. They can catch Wolves. I mean, Wolves I've got their last 2 games here. They've got Palace, and then they make the trip to Chelsea. See, that's not the easiest final game. I mean, Chelsea, arguably, if they've got the season wrapped up in terms of their Champions League qualifications, yes, they could. They've got that Bayern Munich, although again unrealistic second leg. Perhaps that they might take the foot off the gas slightly. But then again, you'd think players would be playing for their places in that Champions League team. So it's not going to be easy for Wolves. And obviously they stuttered yesterday at Burnley, which we know is a tough place to go. And obviously Spurs have got Leicester and then Palace. So it's doable. It certainly is doable. And I mean, technically, if Spurs were to finish where they are, is it still the case? I'm confusing myself now. I'm trying to think if 7 still gets. I think 7 still gets it if anyone but Arsenal wins the FA Cup. So technically, yeah, if Spurs can stick where they are, I mean, Sheffield United have got a game in hand, so they could still go above Tottenham. That's obviously got to be taken into account as well. But if Spurs can just do what they are doing and finding this little bit of momentum, yeah, there's no reason why they can't do it at all. So, yeah, so I've spoken about North London Derby. I've spoken about Mourinho and what he's done. And I think it does deserve some credit, although, you know, it hasn't always been pleasing on the eye. So let's go to last night at Newcastle. Same team as the North London Derby, but very different tactics. You know, rather than the North London Derby had that very deliberate 4-4-2, which had Lucas and Sissoko sitting very deep. You know, there was one time I watched Lucas Moura run towards the halfway line, and he actually stopped himself like this. He kind of almost like, oh, we're going to trip over the line, because he clearly had instructions in certain moments or phases or transitions, whatever it is, that he cannot cross that line. He had to sit back and help Davies. And I think Mourinho made a comment yesterday about how he didn't even remember Pepe playing in that match because Lucas and Davies did such a good job on him, and Bellerin as well. So this was very different. This was more of a 4-3-3 with, what's his name? Sissoko and Lo Celso sitting in front of Winks. And then ahead you had Lucas and Son either side of Kane. For me, I felt Kane, certainly for the first hour or so, struggled a little bit because I think he really appreciated having Son up front with him in North London Derby. But yeah, it was interesting to see. Very same personnel, totally different formation. And Mourinho explained afterwards why he didn't make any changes. He said, to me, in my head, I was thinking if I put them on the bench, then if I need to change the game or want to change the game later on, I'm just going to be bringing on tired players rather than players can make a fresh impact on the team. So that was why he went with how he went. It's an interesting point of view. I guess he was right, as we saw what happened in the second half, you know, which we'll come to. I mean, just before I really get into the kind of bits and pieces of this match, I just obviously want to do a massive kind of props to Serge Aurier, because he's had the most horrific week. You know, early hours of Monday morning, you know, found out his younger brother had been killed in France, back in Toulouse. And how even trying to process that must be incredible. And eventually he decided, he actually asked Mourinho, you know, I want to play against Newcastle. Can I do that? And then tomorrow, today, Thursday, I'd like to, if possible, go and see my mother in France. And obviously you're not going to say no to that. And I felt, you know, other than the kind of little bit before their goal, which was unfortunate, I thought he actually did pretty well. I say pretty well, I suppose you've got to say incredibly well, bearing in mind what must have been going on in that brain of his, because fair play, like I say, you know, people deal with things in very different ways, and to be able to play and show the professionalism required in a Premier League match, just, you know, 48 hours after you found out your younger brother had been killed. Yeah, fair play, absolutely fair play. And I think it's no coincidence that pretty much everyone after the game, all the players, you could see they were dedicating the win to Aurier, because, yeah, it was brave, really brave of him. You know, it could have gone so many different ways. It could have, you know, you fear about what could be going on in his head, but he was so professional. And, you know, and I know I've criticised him obviously in the past for performances and things like that, and I just felt that being able to do that, he deserved massive praise and fair play to him. It was very impressive. He played his part in a defence that continues to do well. It had a little bit of kind of leaky moments. The goal was a brilliant goal from Richie, but there were a couple of little moments where, you know, Shelby had that header that he could have done better with, and Gale, wasn't it, headed against the post. So, you know, it wasn't perfect, but it's so much better than it was. Teams are having to fight so much harder to create stuff against Tottenham, and it's, you know, you look at what's happened with the restart, Sheffield United aside, because that was an absolute aberration, hopefully. But other than that, you've had a soft penalty against United and 2 pretty much wonder goals against Arsenal and Newcastle, which, yeah, they came from mistakes originally, but the actual shot themselves, both from distance, were superb shots. So, you can see what they're doing. And the other player to obviously massively big up, Harry Kane. I mentioned him a little bit there with not having Son up front, but he just battles away. He gives everything, and if you just give him a tiny bit of service, he will absolutely gobble it up. Steven Bergwijn, real moment of quality, pinging in that kind of deep cross. Kane gets away, heads it straight down into the bottom corner. Lovely goal. And then later on was Poacher and Brave Kane. Nice link up with another sub, Eric Lamela, all the way up the pitch, back and forth. Lamela has his shot, pushed out. Kane throws himself in for a diving header, gets booted in the ribs. And the significance, obviously, of both of those goals, mainly the first one, he's now in the 200 club. 201 goals he's scored, which is incredible when you really, again, I'm going to go all stato on you, but it's incredible when you actually drill into the stats. So it's 201 goals from exactly 350 games he's played. This is obviously including his loan career, which, he was a young player and he wasn't scoring many on those. He was scoring because as and when. So it really shows how much he's made up in the Spurs years. But I just want to put that into context, right? So that's 201 goals in 350 appearances. So that's quicker than Cristiano Ronaldo, who did it in 379, Sergio Aguero, who did it in 396 games, Thierry Henry did it in 439, and Wayne Rooney in 449. This is how those massive established Premier League stars, Harry Kane has absolutely flown to this number. And I think he deserves enormous credit. I see every day someone saying, oh, should we just sell him for this price so we can get blah, blah, some unproven European young star or whatever, is his time done? Is he physically finished? Is he no longer the player he was? He's scored 21 goals in 32 matches in a season that's been an utter injury-ravaged mess for him. 21 goals, that's just for Spurs. Add in the 10 he scored for England, that's 31 goals in 38 matches in a season where apparently he's struggled and had a bit of a nightmare and hasn't looked himself. I think most strikers in the world would take that if that's struggling. And I think that just says everything about him. He hasn't had the service. I think taking Christian Eriksen away from him has been a massive kind of outlet taken away in terms of his service. I think Dele Alli not playing directly behind him has been another one. But yet he still scores goals. I'm sorry, but you don't throw away a player who guarantees you that number of goals a season for a maybe. You just don't. And, every indication he's not going to go this summer. The financial market isn't really there for him to go. It would take a crazy offer for him to leave Tottenham. I just can't see it happening. If it does, like I say, it would have to be an enormous offer. And I'm just trying to think, you've only got the likes of City, PSG who can afford that. I don't think Real Madrid have got the money to do that. Or Barcelona, anyone like that. So, and I do think Kane will give Mourinho a full season. Mourinho guarantees silverware. He just does. Whatever you think of him, every club he's been at, he's brought silverware. And for Kane, this is his chance to put that on his CV and at Tottenham, which we know he'd love to do it there. So for me, we just need to stop the talk of, shall we just sell Kane and use the money for this, blah, blah, blah. No, you've got a world-class striker. Keep him fit, and if a Mourinho team actually gets the attacking wherewithal, which you'd hope will be built upon these solid foundations he's building, then you have got, oh my goodness, he'll get 50 goals in the season, back to where he was, a couple of years ago. And that's not to say he hasn't done that badly in the meantime. So yeah, no, I just wanted to say it because Kane, I just think he's so, I don't want to say underappreciated because I think Spurs fans know what they've got, but almost like, the guy's 26. We're not talking about a 33-year-old who's on his way out. We're talking about a 26-year-old who may not have even hit his peak yet. Just because he's had these injuries, he says himself that GPS stats and everything show he's actually running more and he's moving quicker. He's used this time to really develop his body. So let's give the guy a chance. I think he's earned it. Sorry, I sounded a bit preachy. That wasn't actually what I meant to come across. I think it was just, I keep getting asked that question, all Q&A, should we sell Kane? For me, it's slightly mind-boggling. But let's talk about the attacking midfielders behind him. I really think that Mourinho's got options. He said the other day, I wouldn't replace them for anyone. And a lot of, various Spurs fans are like, oh my God, that's the problem exactly with Spurs. But when you actually look at it, you can kind of see his point in terms of, God, you think about the options Pochettino had. I always go back to that FA Cup semi-final against Chelsea when Chelsea were able to bring on, was it maybe Hazard, Costa and Fabregas possibly, and Spurs had, like, no offence to them, but like Nkudu, Janssen, I think Carl Walker came on. Now, there's so many options for him to bring on. You know, he played with Lucas and Son, and then Bergwijn and Lamela both came on and had key parts in 2 of the goals. Then you've got, not only that, but you've got Sessegnon, Jedson, Dele Alli. There's so many options there. And a lot of those are young players. Bergwijn's 22, which is Ali 24, Jedson's 21 or 22. You know, those young, and Sessegnon's 19. There's such, or he might be 20 now. There's such young players. And, you know, the likes of Son, Lucas, and Lamela, they're all around the 28 mark or about to be, and they're experienced players. I was looking at the stats as well. Son's ones I find mind-boggling, because for me, and I think he'd admit it himself, he hasn't been, in terms of his performances, the same, like, all-conquering, confident, absolutely rampaging Son we've seen. But yet he's just been there for Tottenham when they've needed him. In the crunch moments, he has been there. And, you know, he's actually, yesterday marked his record in a Premier League season of goals being directly involved with. It's 21. So he scored 11 and assisted 10. So even in previous seasons when he's been, I feel, in better form, in the Premier League itself, his overall contribution has been less in terms of direct. You know, in all, 18 goals, 12 assists. So that means he's been involved in 30 goals and 39 appearances. I told you I was going to go stat crazy today. That is, you know, a guy who's had a bad arm injury and has been, yeah, you could argue out of form in terms of the way he's been playing. That's incredible statistics. And I think that's the next thing for Lucas. I think that's where he's, you know, I think he was up there for maybe man of the match against Arsenal in terms of the job he did. He was so tactically disciplined. He worked so hard, and he could have had a couple of assists. So I really thought that was one of the best displays. It sounds weird to say from an attacking midfielder who didn't score and didn't get any assists, but he actually tactically was brilliant. He really did everything that Mourinho asked of him, and he totally nullified, as I said, that right-hand side for Arsenal. But his stats, you know, I was looking at those as well. I think that's where he just has to take it to another level. 4 goals and 2 assists from his 33 Premier League games, and he started the bulk of those, pretty much all of them under Mourinho. That's just the one thing for him I think he needs to, even in all, I think it's scored 7 and 3 assists in 45 appearances. So there's more for him to do, much more, but I think Mourinho, that showed why Mourinho really likes him. I think the tactical edge that maybe he has, maybe over someone like Bergwijn. I mean, Bergwijn's stats are good as well. In all this season, including his time at PSV Eindhoven, he scored 5 and laid on 10 assists in his 16 games in Holland, in the Netherlands. And since he's been at Spurs, he's scored 3, and that was his first Premier League assist on Wednesday night. It's only 12 matches, so he's very much coming into a new league, and a quarter of those games he's come off the bench as well, but he's doing well. And even Lamela, you know, we know about his injuries. We know he isn't always there to make the impact we want him to, but in terms of him, he has been involved in 11 goals in 34 appearances, more than half of those from the bench. So he scored 4 and laid on 7 assists. He's done his part. So kind of these players are there. It's just a case now of getting the very best, getting the right tune out of them and working out the best combinations. Mourinho actually got pretty kind of annoyed after the game. The first question after the victory, maybe it shouldn't be the first question, maybe it should have been later down. Someone asked, you know, what has Steven Bergwijn got to do to get into your team? And he kind of was like, you know, you don't ask Klopp that, you don't ask Guardiola that, you don't ask, you know, Solskjaer or Lampard why they aren't playing this player or that. He said that's the point. It's about the squad and all of them contributing. But I think that's a natural thing. I think we all do it as journalists and fans and everything. So, yeah, and I just thought that was an interesting thing. And I want to talk about Lo Celso briefly as well, in terms of, for me, Lo Celso, especially with the first goal, proved to me, I really do think, especially maybe just for these last 2 games, he's struggling a little bit with a groin injury, but give him a go in the Eriksen role. I think that, for me, would be the next step to just pushing on from the solid foundation thing and creating more chances for Kane. As soon as Lo Celso gets around the opposition box, things happen. He hasn't had enough hasn't had enough assists. I think that was officially his first assist yesterday in the Premier League. I think the one against Everton wasn't counted as an assist. I've got a feeling someone said that, or it was a goal and it was counted as an assist, something like that. But anyway, either way, last season, he had really good totals. He scored something like maybe 16 goals and had 6 assists or something. So he was a far more, had more license to get forward for Real Betis. I can't remember. He had a defensive midfielder next to him. It's completely gone out of my head. And it really opened him up to be more of the Eriksen. And I think, obviously, a lot of people talk about Dembele. And of course, Spurs missed prime Dembele. But in terms of Eriksen, even with his lack of form, the Eriksen of 18 months, 2 years ago, was just putting stuff on a plate for everyone. Every match he was creating opportunities, and Spurs missed that. There's a bit of a disconnect between the midfield and the strikers or the wingers. They don't have that natural link up. Maybe Ndombele could have played that role, but we'll come to him in a minute. He's not going to play for the rest of the season, or the week of it. But I do feel that Lo Celso, if you get in players behind him, there's no reason he can't do that Eriksen role. I know why Mourinho plays him deeper, because he's a aggressive, hard tackling, hard working player, and he really plays well in that deeper role. But I do believe that if you've got someone else you can put in that role, with Winks and Saka, or just have those two and just push Lo Celso much further up, I think he'll do a hell of a lot of damage. And I think you'll suddenly see all of his goals and assists go up, and you might find that players like Lucas, Son and Kane and all that benefit as well. So yeah, just one to think of. We'll talk about Ndombele because we've just spoken about him. I'm really wary of making something that isn't there into something, if you see what I mean, because we get that as journalists, we get accused of that. But just for me, it may be me being really cynical as a journalist. You get that way. But just the way Mourinho spoke about Ndombele last night, it may have just been a turn of phrase and it may have meant absolutely nothing. But for me, taking it after what he said the day before, and also what he said in the past, and also his previous with players and injuries, it just didn't quite sound completely innocent to me. And again, I don't want to say that's definitely what it was. It's just my probably very cynical opinion. He essentially said, to paraphrase, because I haven't got the quote to hand, but unless I do, let's have a little look. No, I haven't. He said, let me get it kind of as close to it as I can. He said, it's on the player. The players want to help the team. And then he launched straight into, he said, the players want to help the team, but one player who won't be helping us is Tanguy Ndombele. He'll be out for the rest of the season. Hopefully Dele Alli will give us a hand. And he kind of went and Eric Dyer and spoke like that. And I think it was just the way his brain immediately went from the players will help the team and then said, but Tanguy Ndombele won't. And let me explain the background before I can already hear people going, oh my God, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, which I may be. But the previous day, he said about Ndombele that, well, I hope he'll be all right. It was just like a little thing, kind of essentially. He got a pain in his knee and he had to come off in a training session, but it looked quite small to me. He was quite dismissive of it. So then the next day to have to explain that he's out for the next 2 matches, it kind of fits into, perhaps it's a narrative, perhaps it is actually a factual thing of, he's dug out on Ndombele before about little niggling injuries, and we know he's got previous with this. Luke Shaw used to get it at Man U. He got a real thing, Mourinho, about feeling players just have to play through these things, just get on with it, and it may be fair, it may not be fair, but, Pochettino did it a bit with Winks. I remember him telling me that Winks had an ankle injury that he was just letting it affect him too much. And he just sat him down one day and said, look, you're going to be playing with pain all the time. It's just what it is. You've got an ankle problem that you'll always have. You just need to get on with it, and eventually you'll get it kind of out of your head. And I think Mourinho is kind of a bit of a similar ilk in that it really annoys him that, let's take Eric Lamela. Eric Lamela was practically falling to pieces before lockdown, and he was still making himself available for the team for any game possible. And I think Mourinho loves that, and he made a real point of it. And again, I don't want to say there was a comparison, but I felt, and we all felt, journalists at the time, that he was essentially sending a message to other players, perhaps on Ndombele, saying, look, this guy, he doesn't care. It's all about the team. And I just felt the statement yesterday kind of felt like he was going in that direction. I could be horribly wrong. It maybe wasn't at all, and he maybe genuinely was saying, it's unfortunate he's not there to help us, but it's just the way he phrased it. He didn't say unfortunate. He just said he won't be there to help us. And it was the way he said it in a press conference. Just for me, maybe I'm looking for something that isn't there in terms of I'm so programmed with the Ndombele stuff to I don't know, maybe look for fractions perhaps that, that obviously we know it's not perfect, the relationship between them. Of course it's not. But as I said, I really must reiterate, everything Spurs say is that they're looking to keep Ndombele, and it's not someone they're looking to sell. There will be rumours galore this summer. There will be reports in France, Spain, Italy, linking him with here, there and everywhere. But ultimately, Spurs aren't looking to sell him, and it's down to how really the player reacts. If he gets through the summer and is just sick of it and wants to get out, then that may be the case. Or if he looks back and reflects upon a difficult first season where he's had lots of injury issues, he hasn't adapted particularly well to the Premier League and the demands of it, but he has shown some really promising moments, then maybe that'll be key. You look at someone like Son, who we've said before, had not the greatest of first seasons, wanted to leave, and then bang, next season, utterly different player. So hopefully that happens. So here we go into the last couple of the games. It may well be that my talk of this ridiculous, miracle, unlikely Champions League thing is probably done and dusted by the time you watch this video. It may be. Like I say, it's so incredibly unlikely. I'm just more talking about the fact that Tottenham have got to this stage with 2 games left and are in this position, which makes my mind boggle. But hopefully, they can go for that Europa League spot and we can have some decent European away days next year. And I think Mourinho will genuinely try and win it. He's been in it twice, as he keeps saying us, and he's won it twice. So why not? Tottenham needs silverware. And as I say, I just wanted this week to kind of show the other side of the Mourinho stuff. And I just feel it's not pretty, it's not attractive, amazing football, but I think he's starting to do the things that he wants to do. And with a few tweaks in the summer, a few little transfers here and there, nothing major. I don't think that's what he really is expecting or actually wants, to be fair. I kind of am quite hopeful about what next season's going to bring now. If they can just go out of this one with a bit of momentum, it's going to be a short turnaround. I think it's about 3 weeks they'll have off, and then they'll have about a month of pre-season. They'll be back in. Who knows what could happen? Yeah, I've been impressed with some of the things he's done this week. It started to ease some of the fears I'd say I had. So yeah, fingers crossed. Hopefully this is more of a hopeful video this week. I felt I very much was bringing people down in the recent ones. We've got Mourinho press conference tomorrow ahead of the Leicester game. Leicester struggling. It'll be a good one for Spurs to kind of test where they're at. It'll be a good marker for next season, like I say. Let's keep the momentum going. Back-to-back wins is great, and let's hopefully make it a hat-trick. But it's not going to be easy. But I think we're getting there. I really hope we are. I hope this isn't a false dawn and actually things are starting to click into place and it will help the plans for next season if Mourinho's well aware of kind of who's behind him and who's not, I guess. So, so let's leave it there. I've waffled on for a long time. Sorry if I've forgotten anything. I think I've tried to cover every base that I wanted to. And most of all, stay safe, stay healthy, and I shall catch you after the weekend. We'll talk in the week ahead of the final game of the season. See you then.